Destroy the light and you destroy yourself. Dark cannot exist without knowledge of light.
Nor light without dark.
Come closer. Take my hand. Servant of Sutekh, he needs no other. I bring Sutekh's gift of death to all humanity.
Hello, and welcome to Prepare the Timelash, the Doctor Who podcast that takes a closer look at the Guardians of Time and other cosmic beings that the Doctor has encountered in their many adventures. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Ferguson.
And I am your other host, Ken Hart. Mike, what are we covering today? We're kind of done just about with the cosmic beings, or are we?
Mostly done. This is our last official episode of season 3. Just to be clear, we're going to have a bonus episode, probably drop a few weeks after this, that will be Pyramids of Mars. So we're not quite escaping this, but we figured that'd be like a good coda to the season before we moved on to our season 4 with River Song. In case you missed that announcement, yes, next month we start a new season with River Song, and we're looking forward to covering her adventures. But in the meantime, we have 2 more adventures we'd like to talk about that feature cosmic beings, godlike beings. One of these stories literally is featuring a god. And those 2 stories are both Big Finish audio adventures. One is the new adventures of Bernice Summerfield, the Triumph of Sutekh, who, spoilers, is the villain from Pyramids of Mars. And then the Lovecraft Invasion featuring the 6th Doctor.
Yep, I remember certainly when the Triumph of Sutekh came out, Mike, I was very psyched about this because this was the first reappearance in audio or TV of a villain from one of my favorite classic Doctor Who stories, The Pyramids of Mars.
Yes, and we talked a little bit about Gabriel Wolf in our bonus episode featuring the Satan Pit and the Impossible Planet, because he voiced the Beast there, and he had gotten that job because they were looking for a Gabriel Wolf kind of voice and just decided why not go with the real thing. His voice is amazing. His characterization is really good for both the Beast and for Sutekh. And we're going to kick off with the Triumph of Sutekh. I think it's safe to say he's equally impressive here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his voice as Sutekh, it's really this steel fist and a velvet glove type approach. I mean, he's not this cackling madman that, say, Valentine Dial was as the Black Guardian. He is so measured in his tones and so outwardly calm, but every syllable is just full of menace. He's so good.
Yes. I mean, he's very measured, and I think in this one they beat the phrase a little bit to death that they use in Pyramids of Mars, but I bring you the gift of death is a chilling line every time he utters it, because that's how his character sees the universe. He is just completely, to me, he's actually a very Lovecraftian villain, if that makes sense. In that he's not like, I'm conquering humanity. He's like, why? You're insects. You're ants. Of course I rule over you. You're nothing.
Yeah, so, I think that's a good point, because he's almost has the modus operandi of Cthulhu, but with the personality of Nyarlathotep.
Yes.
Because Cthulhu has no personality.
No.
And Nyarlathotep, I had a beer earlier, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
We'll go with it, sure.
Nyarlathotep. Okay, that Cthulian deity is more interested in infiltration and invading people's minds and trickery. But yeah, that's not Sutekh. I mean, he may sound all nice and everything, but he is just someone who sees utter destruction and lifelessness as the ultimate form of peace.
Yes, absolutely.
Why would you not want that?
Right. He's actually confused at times when people are fighting him. In his mind, this is how the universe should work.
Yeah. So before we get too much into this, though, Mike, for people who may only be familiar with the TV show, who is Bernice Summerfield?
Bernice Summerfield is a creation of one Paul Cornell from the Virgin Adventures. And I don't think we really talked about Benny when we talked about the Wilderness Years and the Virgin novels. But I think it's important to just briefly cover that character. And I think the character came about partly because of something we have talked about before, which is the Virgin New Adventures and the Missing Adventures were both, quote unquote, more adult. And I think one of the thoughts was they wanted a more, again, quote unquote, mature companion to be with the Doctor. Ace, at least as she was in her TV incarnation, wasn't always a good fit for the direction the Virgin novels were going in. And something I have always thought for that, the novels were popping out like one a month.
My God.
Two a month. I mean, if you're just going by the number of adventures, period, someone had appeared in, Ace quickly dwarfed all the other characters.
Right.
Because she was in a ton of the original Virgin New Adventures of the Seventh Doctor. And I think there was just a thought that there needed to be turnover. We needed a new companion. Now, Ace does come back. I do not like the version of Ace that shows up later. The mature one. It doesn't always work.
Basically, they had this whole thing where I know in the Virgin novels where Ace and the Doctor have a big falling out because she gets tired of the Doctor's manipulation. And in one of the best of the Virgin novels, was it Love and War, right? By
Love and
Paul
War,
Cornell?
Yep.
I believe that's the story that introduces Bernice.
Yes, it is.
So it's Bernice and Ace falls for this one guy on this planet. And he dies, and it's all part of the Doctor's plan to essentially save all the people on the planet, or as many as he can, from this invasive fungus-like species.
Right.
It's very creepy, the novel. But it is a brutal novel, and for Ace is kind of the last straw. So Ace leaves the Doctor for a time, and yes, she goes away. She gets, I know at one point the Doctor sends her to Gallifrey as apparently was the plan for TV. And I think we talked about this with the Wilderness Years episode we did, that the Doctor wanted Ace to go to Time Lord Academy on Gallifrey.
Right. That's kind of what he was setting her up to do. And who knows what that would have turned into if there had been an actual season 27. I mean, I've read something where that was going to be McCoy's last season. He was going to drop Ace off at Gallifrey. They were picking up a new companion who was like a cat burglar or something to that effect. And then in his mind, that was his last season anyway. So who knows what would have happened? Nobody thought that far ahead because none of this happened.
Right. No, this happened. Nobody really knew what was going to happen with the show with the BBC. I don't think they quite expected the plug to be pulled.
No.
But that's what happened. So in the books, Ace ends up on Gallifrey at one point, but then she also kind of goes rogue with her own kind of temporal manipulator wrist thingamabob. Oh, no. She has an animal. That's right. In the Virgin novel, she had an animal, almost like a ferret that she could use to travel through time with. And yes, she becomes more quote unquote mature, older, just a little more spiteful. And she pops in and out of the books, sometimes with, sometimes without Bernice Summerfield, a.k.a. Benny.
Right.
So they have a lot of stories with the Seventh Doctor, Benny, Ace, and sometimes just the Seventh Doctor with just one or the other of the companions.
Right.
And Bernice is an archaeologist.
From the 26th century.
Shades of River Song.
Right. Yeah, we'll be talking about some of the Benny River connections in our first River Song episode because there's more than a passing resemblance. I do not think, well, we can get into that next month, but all I'll say is I think River Song started out as a more original character, and rather than it's just, oh, I'm going to make my own version of Bernice Summerfield. That being said, the fact that River Song is an archaeologist from a future, I do think Stephen Moffat did not mind helping himself to more than a few of Bernice Summerfield's traits as he fleshed out River Song.
Mm-hmm. And then when Big Finish came into being, like 1996?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, one of the earliest Big Finish releases was a series featuring Bernice Summerfield.
Right.
With Lisa Bowerman playing the role. And Lisa has continued to be in that role as Benny for a good 25 years now.
Yeah. And it's still going strong.
She is an enduring character among Doctor Who fans. She's met a couple of the other doctors in audio now, but she proved popular enough that first she had her own series, and then she got a few of her own box sets, like a collection of, say, 4 interconnected adventures.
Yes, like the one we're going to be covering now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something that's important if you're interested in checking these out, the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, she is the star.
Yes.
It does feature the Doctor. The 7th Doctor is in this throughout. Ace is in this throughout.
Yep.
But the Doctor, if anything, is more of a supporting character.
Right.
The adventures are through the eyes mostly of Benny Summerfield.
Right.
She is the protagonist making things happen. And again, the Doctor is there. But if you picked up the Triumph of Sutekh and are expecting this to be like a full-on 7th Doctor adventure, you might be disappointed. I mean, that's just not how these work. It's really, she is the star of these particular ones. That's not to say she has appeared in audios, which are dedicated 7th Doctor ones, and she is fully a support character in those.
Yes.
But just wanted to make that clear.
So in this release, which came out in June of 2015, the volume 2 of the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, The Triumph of Sutekh, is 4 stories. We have the Pyramid of Sutekh, the Vaults of Osiris, the Eye of Horus, and the Tears of Isis. And I will say, Mike, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Okay. We're on the same page then.
Yeah,
we're totally on the same page because, yes, overall, I enjoy these, but I found the 4 stories to be quite uneven.
Okay. All right. Yes, we are on the same page then. Yes. It starts off great. Yes. I'll say that. The first story, The Pyramid of Sutekh, the opening sequence is Benny going into a Martian pyramid with a helper and with an assistant. And they find a sarcophagus in the Martian pyramid. And it turns out that Benny's assistant is not really so nice after all, and is actually a servant of Sutekh, the Osiris god of death. And so when he opens the sarcophagus, and it's the 7th Doctor in the sarcophagus.
Right.
And it's very creepy when Sylvester McCoy says the classic line, "I am the servant of Sutekh. He needs no other." And he brings the gift of death to all mankind. So McCoy is nice and creepy as a possessed 7th Doctor who's been taken over by Sutekh. Yeah, so that's really good. And then Benny has to deal with this. And we have the Osiris mummy servitor robots and various puzzles. And things kind of go badly for Benny and the Doctor in this. But it's a good story. And then
it's action-packed, too. Like, I mean, they do take a good job with taking... We'll talk about it in our bonus on Pyramids of Mars, but they really take the time to go through the pyramid and be like, this is this puzzle, trap-filled, Indiana Jones style place. And it's really action-packed. So, I mean, that part's, it's a lot of fun. They take advantage of that.
Oh, yeah. Benny has no problems using a gun if necessary.
Right.
So bad things happen. In the second part, the Vaults of Osiris, Ace turns up, and she and Benny end up traveling in the TARDIS to, what year was it? It was
2015.
2015, yeah. 2015, and they are looking for the Eye of Horus, apparently some item that Sutekh wants to get, because Sutekh, since his defeat at the hands of the Fourth Doctor, Sutekh has just been this spirit. They kind of say that he's a god. You can't, although he's an alien being, his power is so great that, like the other Osiris gods, who are all based on the Egyptian gods, he can't really die. You can destroy his physical form,
right?
But his essence lives on.
Yeah, his incorporeal form is immortal, effectively.
So he's possessed the Seventh Doctor and is reactivating machinery in the first part to create a new body for himself out of the mummified remains of the former Osiris race. So in the Vaults of Osiris, part 2, we don't even see Sutekh.
No.
Not barely. I think we just barely see Sutekh. And it's all this more heist type thing. Benny and Ace dealing with a bunch of disreputable characters. It reminded me of like a World War II, a Cold War story, where you don't know who to trust.
Yeah.
And there's all this back and forth where like you have one faction and another faction. And it's okay.
It's all right.
It's okay. But then, Mike, yeah, go ahead. What do you want to say about the Vaults of Osiris?
I was going to say, so they're looking for this thing, whatever it is, the what is it, the Eye?
The Eye of Horus.
Which is supposed to like help free the Doctor from his imprisonment. But quite honestly, it's the MacGuffin of Doom. I mean,
yes.
And it's entertaining, but as much as I was entertained, so much of this is just filler. It's just them going from... I mean, I felt like I was in a not terribly good video game at times where you meet an NPC, you have the obligatory dialogue, they send you on the way to the next NPC.
Oh, yeah.
You might fight the next NPC depending on what you say, but then you just get the information to go on to the it just seems very performative.
No, you're right. It's filler. I mean, it's filler. Nothing really important happens in part 2.
To me, it's not a great story when you go, all right, they need to find the Eye of Horus. Well, they do. And really, nothing else important happens.
Right. But then, Mike, what did you think of part 3, The Eye of Horus?
That's the best one, I thought.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really liked this one.
Okay. All right.
I'm taking you didn't.
It confused the hell out of me, Mike, because the stuff with Benny and the Doctor in ancient Egypt dealing with the only Egyptian pharaoh who was a woman who was written out of history. Yeah. Yep. And she is an actual figure.
Yeah. Well, this is why I found it all interesting.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, I'm an Egyptology buff. So on one level, I found that very cool that they actually had her in a story and they kind of fit her whole story into this Doctor Who tale, where in reality, yes, when she died, her name was stricken from all the records. They basically, her son who succeeded her as Pharaoh, went out of his way to remove any trace of her existence.
Right, which weird, but yes.
Yeah. And because it was, it was a very patriarchal society, I guess, with the Pharaoh. But Sutekh shows up, and that's where I kind of lose it a bit, though, Mike. Because, so Sutekh, he's in a mortal body.
Right.
Because he's still in the body that he created for himself back on Mars. But he's time traveled into ancient Egypt. And he seems very much aware of Egyptian mythology and Egyptian history. And that was kind of what baffled me a bit because Pyramids of Mars, the Egyptian gods were supposedly based on the Osiris.
Right.
And here's Sutekh posing as kind of this humble traveler who is very much aware of ancient Egyptian history. And that's where I'm trying to fit it into some sort of logic in terms of where does Sutekh end and the Osiris begin and ancient Egypt, where does all that fit in together?
Okay. This is my one downside with this particular story, and I guess I looked at it a little differently. So what we have when Benny we're back in ancient Egypt.
Right.
You have the pharaoh Hatshepsut, who is our female pharaoh, the only one. And she has a mysterious advisor, and they even imply he's going to be her consort, which is
Right.
the Doctor. So he's on the one side of it. And he
Yes.
has no memory of himself, which I'll just say that's almost like a trope of a Benny story, is the Doctor loses his memory and she's got to remind him who he is. That's happened more than once. But Sutekh's portrayal is what I don't get, only because, we talked about him. He's more like Cthulhu. Humanity and mortals are beneath his contempt.
Right.
So I just had more of an issue with, I understand some of why he did this from I'll just say from a story perspective, but from a character perspective, I'm like, I don't think he would have done this. This is not the approach he would have taken.
Yeah,
It's weird.
Yes. That is.
You're going to pretend to be a humble human? Since when? That's the part where I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah, that's my problem with it, Mike. Yeah, I don't get what he's there to
I mean,
do.
he's trying to manipulate people in this role, but again, from what we saw of him, even in the earlier stories in this very tale of Volume 2, The Triumph of Sutekh, forget about Pyramids of Mars, he's too arrogant. That's kind of what I felt anyway. I didn't feel like the story made it clear that this is the only way Sutekh, again, a being with supposed godlike powers, this is how he would handle this situation, or this is the best way to say it. I never got that feeling. I enjoyed a lot with the Doctor. I enjoyed what Benny gets mistaken for Hathor,
the
goddess, which is the goddess of lost causes and beer. So
Benny's all into that.
Benny's like, oh, okay. Yeah, makes sense. Sure, that's me. But yeah, Sutekh is honestly the one character in this that's like a misstep. I happen to enjoy it a lot, and I guess it bothered you more than it bothered me. It bothered me, but I was just like, all right, whatever. It is what it is.
It sounds like we agree on the pros and cons, just in terms of how much it affected you versus me.
Right.
I had a problem with it the first time I listened to it when it came out, and this was the second time I listened to the whole thing in preparation for this recording. And it still kind of bugged me. Now, the Doctor is great in this because he's been in ancient Egypt for quite some time, apparently.
Right.
Even introducing ancient Egypt to alien technology, flying ships and things like that.
Right.
And he has a plan. He always has a plan, but he doesn't remember Benny. And it's very frustrating to Benny. And the Doctor says, well, he's misplaced his mind. He needs to do so much for this plan that he needed to free up some room in his brain.
Right.
So he offloaded a chunk of his memory.
Yeah. He basically deleted files from the hard drive.
Yes. So he basically removed a lot of his memory temporarily to make room for all the stuff he needed to gather for this big plan of his. So at the end of this, things continue to go bad for our heroes, and it seems that Sutekh is triumphant. He gathers enough power from the worship of the Egyptians whom he's fooled into praising him, and he uses the new technology that the Doctor has provided to restore himself to full power.
Right.
And he jumps forward to Earth in the present day, because for his ultimate revenge of the Doctor, the first world he's going to destroy will be Earth.
Yep.
As the Doctor knows it. So that brings us to the fourth installment, The Tears of Isis. So, Mike, what did you think of this concluding chapter?
It's okay. I find the Doctor's plan confusing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I don't like about, less so the plan, but he does this whole thing where the Doctor acts all like, oh, the plan won't work. Oh, we have no hope. Oh, we're done, and all this other stuff. And then later he yells at Benny for, why didn't you trust me about the plan? And it's like, you literally just told her it sucked. And not, there was no scene of, look, he didn't do the trust me, and then he does this all as some kind of act.
Yeah.
She just sees him just saying, we're doomed. And then he's like, well, why didn't you trust me and that I had a plan? It's like, because you acted like all was lost. And why would I believe you?
Right.
It's messy. I'll say that.
And also, it's understandable that Benny and Ace would be upset because the story opens with Sutekh having won.
Yep.
The Earth is a barren wasteland, aside from this one manor house that has a few devoted loyalists of Sutekh. Just the British gentry. I mean, they're these aristocrats who feel they're going to be praised by Sutekh for being his last followers, and Sutekh uses their worship of him as a focal point that brings him to the present day. And
yeah, that is very Cthulhu-like. I will say that. That's also Lovecraftian. Of just,
it's true.
The whole, we have the cowled, robed followers who are just doomed for, why are you worshiping this person who is just going to kill all of you? But whatever.
Yeah. So when the Doctor, Benny, and Ace arrive on Earth, it has already been destroyed.
Right. Kind of like shades of we'll get to this in our bonus of Pyramids of Mars, but Sarah opening the door to 1980.
Yes.
And just seeing everything's done.
Exactly. That's what it looks like. Yes.
Yep.
So Benny and Ace are understandably upset.
Yeah.
And the Doctor is talking about how they can undo it or fix it, but then he's also seems like, as you say, unsure of his own plan. And it resolves, and it's, of course, the usual Seventh Doctor, I've been, 3 steps ahead of you the whole time kind of a thing. And I agree with you, Mike. It's a little confusing. It's a little awkward. I didn't quite buy it. And it seemed unnecessarily cruel to Benny and Ace.
Right.
That he could have told them something. And granted, I understand because Sutekh can read minds. So you don't want to blow things too much. But yeah, he's a bit of a jerk, the Seventh Doctor, in the last story, I have to say.
Well, it's that, and this is just the thing that actually, it hit me. So I listened to all this for the first time in preparation for this podcast. It just seemed like a good idea. So I hadn't listened to it previously. But I'd listened to other of the Bernice Summerfield New Adventures.
Okay.
And I really like that, as we said at the beginning of this, Benny is the protagonist.
Yeah.
In this last of the 4 stories, Benny could have gotten a beer in the TARDIS.
Yeah, she's very passive in this.
And done nothing.
Yeah.
And you would have had the exact same outcome. She and Ace could have gotten a beer, watched TV, done something else, and the Doctor would have resolved everything on his own. Neither one of them have that much impact. And considering they were the ones doing all the heavy lifting in the first 3 parts, to sideline them in the 4th part. And yes, I know I would have less of a problem of this, and it's weird, if this was billed as a 7th Doctor story.
Yeah.
I would have been like, okay, then this is kind of typical for what happens. I still would have found it uneven in that, then why did Benny do all the heavy lifting in all the early parts?
Yeah.
But in this, the Doctor has his plan and is in such control over the whole thing and is doing his Machiavellian chess-playing self or that persona that I just found it out of place.
Yeah.
For part 4 of this particular adventure.
No, that's an excellent point. I hadn't considered it in those words, but you're absolutely right. Benny is a bit player in the concluding chapter of what is supposedly a Bernice Summerfield set of adventures.
Right.
And when she hadn't been that, she had been very active in parts 1, 2, and 3. And she does Bupkis in part 4.
Right.
So yeah, it's frustrating.
It's very frustrating. That's why I found this so uneven. And again, the Doctor has this plan where, spoilers, Sutekh thinks he won.
Right.
What's really happened is the Doctor has shifted Sutekh and followers, and that little wasteland is not where Sutekh thinks it is.
Right.
Basically, it's in a different time zone.
Yeah.
So,
centuries from now, when Earth has already been devastated by solar flares.
Right.
Kind of like what they imply in the arc in space. The reason there was the arc in space in the first place because of solar flares. So it's kind of that time zone where Earth has been devastated and Sutekh thinks he's gained all this power from the destruction of the Earth, but no, Earth is really already destroyed. Sutekh gained absolutely nothing from that.
Right. And is unaware of
Yes.
that, which that's the other part of the plan I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say he did that to countless other existing Doctor Who villains and they believe it. Okay,
Yeah.
I can go with this. For someone who is godlike and we're not just paying lip service to that.
Yeah.
He is legitimately a god. It's like, really? That fooled him?
Yeah. Especially, I mean, you would think that someone like Sutekh, who has committed big acts of destruction in his long history, apparently, enough so that the Osiran race imprisoned him. You would think that he would know the difference between a barren planet that he destroyed and a barren planet that was already barren when he landed on it.
Right.
He wouldn't know the difference?
Right. I mean, because the implication is it's a wasteland because of his presence and he destroyed it. I don't quite know how that actually would work, but it would strike me, to your point, that he would be going, but I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I would at least expect suspicion of, oh, that was easy. That was almost too easy. What's going on? So in theory, if you just say, that's the plan, oh, I'm going to time shift them, it works. But the way it actually plays out, I just found it convoluted and it didn't entirely work for me.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, I like for all four of these stories, Ace and Benny together are great.
Oh, yeah.
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 They're a fun combo.
Yeah.
If nothing else, that's why I would recommend, and I'm serious, I would highly recommend. I enjoyed this series a lot. It's, again, story-wise, there were issues with some of it, but I love listening. I could listen. Gabriel Wolf, you've heard that phrase.
Oh, my God.
I'd listen to him read the phone book. Him, I would. I would totally listen to him do anything. His voice is fantastic. And I really liked Ace and Benny in this. To your point before, the one I wasn't crazy about was the Seventh Doctor, just because he just had some weird characterizations throughout this whole thing. Between the amnesiac to the manipulator to... He was strange in this one.
Yeah, and well, we haven't really talked much about the Seventh Doctor aside from the Ghostlight episode that we did a while back.
Yeah, and Greatest Show,
Yeah, Greatest Show, right. The whole image of the Doctor as this Machiavellian manipulator is the one that has been most frequently adopted in fiction and in fandom. But it's not always the case. I mean, it is kind of inconsistent, where he seems to be playing four-dimensional chess with everybody. But there are some stories where, it doesn't quite pay off that way. So in this set, he does the whole planning multiple steps ahead. But I think the payoff isn't as satisfying as, say, I would want it to be. It's hard for me to really appreciate how brilliant he was because you don't really understand what his plan is.
Well, and I think some of them, you don't understand what the plan is. He does not really tell anybody what the plan is. And granted, yes, in story, Sutekh reads minds. If telling people might cause problem if you actually want to pull off your plan.
Right.
But I guess what I found, and it's more in the audio, whenever I get one of these stories where the Seventh Doctor is the master manipulator, ultimate chess master, whatever, there are some stories where that becomes such the focus of the character that writers, I feel, sometimes miss that he's still the Doctor.
Yeah.
And so he becomes this brilliant person who can do 10 moves ahead of everybody else, but he's a colossal prick. Not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah.
And he's very selfish, and he's only seems interested in getting his plan executed to the point of everything else.
Right.
And we mentioned that with the novels, and I actually thought that was a problem with the novels long ago, was the novels just had him keep pushing and pushing and pushing Ace's buttons until she couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And that always struck me as misguided. I could see the Doctor pushing to a certain point, but not the it's for your own good.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I think if Ace pushed back against the Doctor would back off and realize, even if it's, I want you to be Picard, the Time Lord Academy, and I want you to do this, and I'm basically the equivalent of I'm toughening you up. I think he would realize at a certain point, I have to toughen you up a different way. This isn't working.
Yeah.
This is actively harming you.
Well, there's a level of cruelty involved. And we talked a bit about this in Ghostlight, that there are times when his way of teaching borders on cruelty at times.
Yeah. And that is part of his character. But again, I feel like the character of the Doctor as a whole, when sometimes they need it pointed out to them that they've gone too far.
Yeah.
But in nearly all cases, when it's been pointed out the Doctor has gone too far, I always think of the very end of Resurrection of the Daleks when Tegan leaves the Fifth Doctor.
Okay.
And he just has that line, "It seems I must amend my ways." And you just see him he knows he screwed up.
Yeah.
And Tegan just runs off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you still could have had that moment with Ace in the books, but I mean, he doesn't even seem that, at least from my memory of it, he still doesn't seem all that regretful about it. It's like, all right, well, no, I needed to do this. And that's kind of that's pretty much what happens in this story as well. They're just no, I had to do all this stuff. I don't regret that I had to hurt you. And it's like, that's not quite the full character of the Doctor, I don't think. I think the seventh incarnation gets a pass to do some non-doctory things, and I don't always think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's like just as you were talking before, I couldn't help but think back to the never cruel or cowardly line.
Yeah,
and
oh boy, is he cruel.
Yeah, but again, I understand why he has to keep things secret from Benny and Ace just because of Sutekh's mental abilities, but it just, I don't know. It just comes across as cruel. I will say, on a little side note, that when we were at Gallifrey One,
yes, we will talk about this in a little bit.
We will talk about that. I did talk to James Goss briefly.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, he produced this box set, and he also wrote the third story, The Eye of Horus, the one that takes place in Egypt. And I asked him, did Gabriel Wolf come into the studio? And he said, yes, he did. And he said
awesome.
It was fascinating because he says Gabriel Wolf is a very private individual. Like, he comes across as shy. And when it comes to Big Finish, the only person it seems that he'll allow to contact him is Nick Briggs.
Oh.
He doesn't like sharing his contact information with anyone.
Okay, so that private where,
Yeah. And so to hear the voice of Sutekh being kind of a little reclusive or even a little timid about reaching out to other people, that I found that very amusing.
Yeah. Well, especially, you hear him as Sutekh or the Beast, and it's just like, this may sound crazy, but he sounds like a god. I don't know how else to describe him. He just sounds like a god.
Yeah. Oh, he's so good. So, yeah, that's the Triumph of Sutekh. Anything else you want to say about this, Mike?
No, like I said, I enjoyed it. It had its ups and downs. I actually think if you're interested in just who is Benny Summerfield, or, I remember Benny Summerfield, she was a neat character in the books, by all means, check this out.
Yeah.
I really think it's well worth it, but it's not without its issues.
Yeah, I mean, I know I knocked it a bit more than you did in general, but yeah, I enjoyed it mostly for the actors. I mean, I think, McCoy, especially in that first story, McCoy is great as a possessed slave of Sutekh.
Yes.
and Gabriel Wolf is great throughout, and Lisa Barrowman and Sophie Aldred are, they're always good to listen to. So yeah, it's good.
And I'll say that for we were talking about how we didn't like the characterization per se, especially towards the end of the Seventh Doctor. This must have been so much fun for Sylvester McCoy because he's playing the consort of a pharaoh. He's playing Sutekh's servant.
Yeah.
He does a lot of different things for him in this. So it's not just a typical Seventh Doctor. So I can only imagine how much fun that must have been for him.
Yeah. So we made some comments about Lovecraftian monsters Mike, earlier, which is a good way to talk about the second story that we're covering today.
Yep. The second story being the Lovecraft Invasion by Robert Valentine. And this features the Doctor with two companions we talked about a while ago. Flipping Constance when we talked about Static.
Yes.
In our first season when we were talking Big Finish. They reappear here. Did this come like right after or right before Static in the chronology? I want to say it does, or it's close.
Well, pretty much the interesting thing about this story, it starts in media res, I believe is the proper term, because it follows up on a story that
never happened,
was not actually released. Yeah, it never happened. I mean, it starts off in an action sequence with the Doctor, Flip, Constance, and a new person, a bounty hunter named Calypso Jones, who joins them temporarily because she is searching for something called the Omnifax or Omnifrax.
Yeah, the Somnifax, yeah.
Somnifax, and it is this artificial intelligence that can make people's imagination become real.
Right.
And they know that in the wrong hands or around the wrong type of person, it can be devastating. And the Somnifax is interested in conquest and destruction and power. It's not a beneficent AI, I'll say that.
No, this is straight out of Terminator AI of machines are going to take over. Or not so much of machines, but the intelligence wants to take over. So as you said, it feeds on imagination. They are tracking it through both space and time to try and narrow down what the Somnifax is trying to latch onto. And as it turns out, the Somnifax, with the Sixth Doctor following it, lands in Providence, Rhode Island, 1937. And wants to find one H.P. Lovecraft.
Right. So H.P. Lovecraft, I'm sure most of our listeners know, is the man who created what we now call the Cthulhu mythos. And he was a writer of pulp fiction.
Yep.
He was a commercial failure in his day. And he kept writing these stories along with a few other writers he became friends with.
Robert E. Howard was one of them.
Yep. And they played off each other's stories to kind of flesh out these tales of the great old ones, these ancient monstrous beings who had dominated the planet eons ago and have been sleeping since and waiting for the right opportunity to come back or for a group of, say, cultists to resurrect them somehow. So certainly a person with that sort of imagination would be a very tasty lure for the Somnifax.
Right. And just to circle back to, we were talking about Sutekh as like a Cthulhu-like being. When we say a Cthulhu-like being, what the great old ones or these gods that Lovecraft created, like Cthulhu, they are these beings of pretty much infinite power or power that's incomprehensible. And again, in a lot of the stories, similar things happen. Some cultist or something, I'm going to summon Cthulhu to get power. Bad idea.
Bad idea.
Because inevitably, whenever Cthulhu is summoned or whenever one of the great old ones is summoned, they regard humans the same way we would regard paramecium or, something in a petri dish. It's that insignificant and uninteresting to them. And they are that much of great power. So for this story, this is what the Somnifax wants to effectively become, is that kind of power with that kind of scale.
Yeah. So when they find Howard Phillips Lovecraft, he's kind of broke. He doesn't have a lot going for him. And he's also a very bitter, xenophobic man. And that kind of gets to something that is a little controversial about this story for people who have read and enjoyed Lovecraft's fiction.
Yep.
Because as is frequently the case, maybe not often the case, as is frequently the case, sometimes you have to separate, or at least attempt to separate, the work from the creator. Because in this case, the creator, Lovecraft, was not a nice person.
No.
He was a racist, he was xenophobic, he was bitter. And this is mentioned multiple times in the story, maybe too much.
Maybe too much. I do think so. I do know for this story, some of that was added in. They had
Yes.
recorded the story fully. And then I want to say it was probably when they released it was around the George Floyd
Yep.
incident and in real life. And they just decided no. And the reason I think they put in it and maybe went overkill with it, I do think I agree with you. I think they went a little too hard on it, but I don't think they addressed it at all in the original draft. And,
yeah, I think you're probably right.
And my belief is, and I think it's the correct one, Lovecraft was a racist. There is no way around that. I mean, you even get to some of how, forget his personal correspondence, of which he has a trove of letters, which, good God, if you've ever read them, I have.
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Yep. There's no doubt. But even just like in his stories, like the way he characterizes the deep ones and some other creatures, it's not subtle. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, the description is full on some racist stereotypes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So within the story, it's literally the Doctor finding out with Flip and Constance about Lovecraft. Constance hasn't really heard of him. I love the fact that Flip's only real knowledge of him comes from the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game.
I was going to say that, Mike. That was going to be my next point. I love that, especially friends. You know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you would know that Mike and I are both gamers, and we're very familiar with the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. And apparently, so is Flip.
Yes.
And Flip talks about how this friend of hers ran a few Call of Cthulhu games. And so she is familiar with the names and some of the creatures, the Shoggoth and the Migo.
Yep.
Oh, it's I got such a kick out of listening to that
I was laughing during that part. That was great. But that's also when the Doctor, when they first realized that the Somnifax is hunting down Lovecraft, Flip is kind of like, oh, cool, because she knows Call Cthulhu, the game.
Yeah.
Constance is like, who? The Doctor is like, ugh, him.
Yeah.
A racist. And calls him out on it, just flat out.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind that. And I don't mind the coda at the very end.
Right.
There's a very pleased Lovecraft at the end of it, comparing himself to the Doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And the Doctor is like, oh, no. We are nothing alike.
You know, Mr. Lovecraft, you could so easily have been better than you are.
I beg your pardon?
Well, I've journeyed throughout time and space, and in all my travels, I have never met anyone who professed a doctrine of hierarchical bigotry who didn't place themselves at the top of their social order. And for someone who considers himself an intellectual, Mr. Lovecraft, the premise that you are somehow superior by virtue of your birth or heritage is the most ignorant, poisonous and conceited idea you could possibly entertain. So please, do not insult me by suggesting we are alike in any way.
And calls him flat out on his racism.
Yeah.
And which is good. Now, this also gets sprinkled in several times throughout the story. And I'm like, I think there was one point I was driving in my car listening, and I heard the Doctor say it for like the 5th time. And I was like, we get it. You don't need to keep saying this over and over again. You've made the point. This is not something you need to repeat every 10 minutes. At least to me, seemed to be what was happening. But I would rather go overkill on that than not address it at all. So I remain a listener who was happy that that's how they handled it.
Yeah, it is an issue that people have wrestled with, especially in more recent years with J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter novel. Because J.K. Rowling has been very vocal about her
She's transphobic. Yeah.
Yeah, her anti-transgender views, and it's understandably upset a lot of her readers.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, I'm not going to read Harry Potter books anymore. I'm not going to go to the Harry Potter stuff at Universal Studios. But it's a problem. And it's one thing that I think when you're a fan of a work of fiction, or an artist painting, and you find out that artist was not the nicest person or had some really abhorrent viewpoints. You really have to think about, well, can I actually enjoy what this person created?
Oh, yeah.
Or is that rewarding that person somehow? So it's easier, I think, for maybe readers to continue to enjoy H.P. Lovecraft because while we know of his racism now, it wasn't as well known as, say, 20 years ago. Whereas J.K. Rowling is quite actively and continually transphobic in her comments.
Right. I mean, and I will say this for anybody who likes Harry Potter or Lovecraft or whoever. I mean, separating art from artists is, I think, something that happens on a personal basis.
Right.
I mean, I really, as a teenager, enjoyed reading Lovecraft and reading Robert E. Howard, who wrote a lot of the Conan stories, but he also wrote quite a number of Cthulhu-related horror stories.
Yeah.
And I was a young, dumb teenager who did not notice any of the races.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
I was just kind of like, oh, okay. As I got older and as I read more about the respective authors, I was like, oh. So I'll just say that. Do I still enjoy their stories? To a degree.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I don't read them. I still do. I still go back and read. I am a big fan of the Conan stories, so I will always go back and read. But I also have the knowledge that, yes, there are attitudes in there that are not great, and that the authors held some really off opinions about a lot of things. And you just have to kind of reconcile all of that in your head. And if you can, great. And if you're like, I'm never reading Lovecraft again, or I'm never reading J.K. Rowling again, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah, there's no real 100% right answer. I mean, we talked about this when we covered the talents of Wang Chiang.
Yeah. That's a great point.
A year or so ago. I mean, certainly by today's standards, or even but not even today, the standards of, say, 30 years ago, it's racist at times.
Yeah.
But,
it's cringeworthy. I mean, At the time, there's.
Yeah, right. So it's one of those things where, do you judge it by 1970 standards? I mean, should you feel bad for enjoying the talents of Wang Chiang? There's no right answer. Right. Everyone has to come to their own decision about how they feel about that.
So with the Lovecraft Invasion, one of the things I found interesting about it is once they get there, the TARDIS crew splits pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And what you wind up with is Flip and the Doctor. How would you describe it? They basically go into the Somnifax's realm, which is like the realm of imagination.
Yeah, right. They travel into the Somnifax's mind, which is now populated by the creation of H.P. Lovecraft.
Right.
And in what is a very cute twist, they are quickly accompanied by Randolph Carter, who was a protagonist in a couple of Lovecraft stories and is voiced by, and to the Doctor and Flip, looks like H.P. Lovecraft.
Right. Yes, that's almost like his avatar.
Yes.
He's Lovecraft. So Lovecraft isn't exactly a pleasant character, but that's the way he's written. That's the way he's played. I was fine with that. Randolph Carter, I thought, was an awesome character.
Yes.
Because at one point, there's a whole thing where he starts asking the Doctor about, because he figures out, I'm a fictional creation. So he starts asking about his creator. And he starts doing things like, well, did my creator go to Miskatonic University like me? And the Doctor's like, there's no such thing. And your creator tried getting into Brown, but failed. And just gives him a whole bunch of things. And Randolph Carter winds up getting more and more upset because he's like, so I'm the wish fulfillment.
Oh, yes.
Of this guy. I'm just what this guy wants to be. And isn't terribly pleased. And you even get Flip going, I don't know if you should have told him that. And the Doctor is effectively tells her, he's been very good to us. I feel like I owed it to him to tell him the truth.
Yeah.
Which is funny to say about a fictional character, but I mean, he is such a good character. And meanwhile, the Lovecraft is kind of, I'll say, I thought they portrayed him very well. He's a very flawed human being.
Yes.
He does help them. He does try to do the right thing. And this will get into it. while they're doing all this, they're in his imagination. He's with Constance and Calypso in the real world.
Yeah.
Constance, if you're not terribly familiar with the character, is from the 1940s.
Right.
So I thought that was a good pairing because she's kind of a contemporary of Lovecraft. Not really, but her calling out Lovecraft on his racism, I thought hit way better than Flip doing it would.
Yes.
Because Flip's from our time.
Right.
Flip's from now. Constance is from the 40s. So she can be like, no, this isn't a thing of the times. I am from your time, and what you are saying is completely unacceptable.
Right. And she joined the Doctor coming from World War II.
Right.
She was one of the code breakers.
Right.
And she basically says, I'm from a time where we're at war against a nation that feels a lot of the same things you do about the racism and the hating Jews and such. So she's offended by him. But I agree with you. She at least is more or less a contemporary who can relate to, well, she's more of a touchstone for him than someone like the Doctor or Flip.
That's probably a better way, yeah.
Yeah. I also want to say I love the chemistry, though, between Constance and Calypso Jones.
Oh,
I mean, the two of them are, they're really good together.
Right, which is funny when you have a 1940s codebreaker with a 51st century bounty hunter.
Right.
They are a fantastic pair. One of my favorite scenes is, I think they're going to what was like the insane asylum.
Oh, yeah.
And Calypso introduces Constance as Nurse Ratched and H.P. Lovecraft as, and this is our patient Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And it just starts like throwing it, and Constance is like, who? And you see Calypso. Never mind. Just roll with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have moments like that, which are very good in there. So,
And I will say that I like the resolution, though, the way the Doctor defeats the Somnifax, because spoilers, the Somnifax does gain followers, and he convinces the followers in this imagination world to summon Cthulhu.
Yep.
Which, as you say earlier, Mike, that's a bad thing to do.
Yes.
But the Somnifax wants to do it because this will be like the Somnifax has never been so powerful. But in turning into Cthulhu, the Doctor and Flip, being relatively familiar with Lovecraft's fiction, knows that he also makes himself as Cthulhu vulnerable to certain things, to like a banishment ritual.
Right. There is that to pretty much all of the great old ones.
Yeah.
They are almost infinitely powerful, and they still are relatively powerful if you summon them, but bringing them to a corporeal form on this plane means they have a fraction of their full ability or power. So they use that against the Somnifax becoming Cthulhu.
Yeah.
As you said, summoning, bad idea.
Bad idea. So I overall enjoy the story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as a fan of the Cthulhu mythos like you, I mean, I and of the Call of Cthulhu game, I certainly enjoyed it. I think the acting's really good. Like you said, the fellow who plays Lovecraft, Alan Marriott, he's a Canadian actor. I think he's terrific as Lovecraft.
Yeah, I thought he was terrific. He also plays Randolph Carter.
Yeah, Randolph Carter as well. And I always liked Flip. I mean, I've listened to a bunch of the Sixth Doctor and Flip stories. Flip is a lot of fun to listen to. Just very endearing, and Constance is a good foil for Flip.
Yes. I actually really enjoy Constance, but like I need that TARDIS crew of her, Flip, and the Doctor.
Yes, yes.
The three of them together are phenomenal.
Yeah, that I would say that is like they are one of my favorite of the Big Finish TARDIS teams.
Yeah.
Just the three of them together. I really get such a kick out of listening to the three of them in a story. So I think the acting is good. I think the sound effects are really quite good.
Oh, they're amazing.
With the Shoggoth.
Yeah.
Oh, and was even Wilbur Whateley pops up at one point.
Yep. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. And I just think for some people who are fans of Lovecraft's work, it's going to be a bit challenging at times if they didn't know about Lovecraft's less attractive qualities, let's say.
Yeah. And I'll just say this. If you're like, oh, he wasn't that, read his correspondence. He was. I mean, no.
Yeah.
He was not a pleasant human being. I mean, unfortunately.
Yeah, read his nonfiction, folks. Yeah.
if you want to, but I mean,
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, I'm not telling you to. Please, yeah.
yeah.
So, anything else you want to talk about with the Lovecraft Invasion, Mike?
The only thing I'll say is if you were expecting like, oh, is Cthulhu gonna show up, or is Nyarlathotep, or any of the other yeah, they're in there, but much like Lovecraft's work or any of August Derleth or any of the other ones who wrote this, they're not characters. I mean,
Yeah.
Cthulhu never speaks. It's just that he's just a force of nature. It's there. So I don't think if you're expecting, well, where are they as characters? They're not in there, but in the Lovecraft stories, they are.
Yeah.
They're more this thing that floats in the background, and then when they show up, the story is over. Pretty much. It's like the cultists go, oh, we're in way over our heads. Oh, we're dead. And that's pretty much, and we failed all our sanity checks. So,
oh my God, yes. One more thing I want to add. This has one of my favorite covers, bits of cover art of any Big Finish release.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, Tom Newsom did the cover art. It is gorgeous. It's the Dr. Flip and Randolph Carter looking like a classic 1930s Private Eye. The Doctor holding a flashlight and Flip holding a Call of Cthulhu source book.
Yes.
And there's...
I'm almost wondering if it's like Horror on the Orient Express or like one of the really good source books. And you have Cthulhu floating around the background.
And there's even, as I'm looking at it as we're talking right now, there's even a gray, one of the aliens.
Yep.
And a couple of tentacles floating around. It's just a gorgeous piece of artwork. I had this as my phone's wallpaper for some time when it came out.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. So, Mike, we mentioned this before, so let's dive into it now. What did you think of Gallifrey One in Los Angeles?
We're obviously not having a full-on bonus episode of that. Ken and I had such a good time in 2023. We decided to come back for 2024. Had a great time.
Yep.
I maintain last year was not a fluke. It's a convention where I can't say this without like people going, oh, you're making it up, or it sounds like hyperbole. Like everybody there is just nice.
Yeah.
Everybody there is just super duper nice. And I really enjoy being around a ton of like-minded people who enjoy our favorite show as much as we do.
Yes.
It's just been a blast.
Yeah.
Highlights for me, I spoke at TARDIS Talks to talk about the Doctor's relationship with UNIT.
Yep.
I got good feedback on that, so I guess it went pretty well. My picture with Alex Kingston as River Song.
Oh, nice.
Was perfect. So I went cosplaying as Derek Jacobi's master. And for the photo line, I'm standing online watching her, and she is one of these actors if you've never done like a celebrity photo, some people are kind of standoffish, and that's okay. Not everybody has to be super gregarious when you do this. She's super gregarious.
Yeah.
So she would introduce herself before I said anything. She's introducing herself. I'm like I know who you are. You don't need to do that.
Really? She introduced herself?
Oh, I'm Alex. It's a pleasure. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. So you would go up to her and she would just ask you, like, hi, I'm out. Do you have a pose in mind? And if you said so, she rolled with it. I think you could pretty much tell her anything and she was going to go with it. But if you didn't, she had like, oh, we could do this. We could do this. I mean, she was very into it. So I show up dressed up as the Jacobi master and she looks right at me and goes, you're a baddie. Well, you're dressed as one. So this is what we're going to do. And she grabbed me by the tie. I didn't even have time to say yes or no. She just did. Yeah. So what do? I just rolled with it. I stuck out my tongue. She laughed. The cameraman asked me to move my laser screwdriver slightly because I was blocking something apparently with the photo. They took it. It's on my Instagram. I think we have it on the Prepare the Pod Instagram. It was a great pick. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, it's really good. Yeah. So definitely check out our Instagram.
We posted a lot of pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I was just amazed that she would do that, considering how long the lines were for photos.
Oh, she got yelled at by her handlers because she was talking to people.
Yeah.
And they're like, keep it moving. And you could kind of see her. whatever. And she was going to do what she was going to do.
Yeah,
So-
I've, you and I have both been on these lines before, and usually it's you have maybe 3 or 4 seconds of contact with the person
right.
before you moved on.
Oh, that was Billie Piper, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. I expect it.
Yeah, I expect it. She said hello. I'm usually just thrilled to get the hi, very nice to meet you, and she's like, oh, good to, and that was 5-second conversation. They take the picture, and you go.
Mhm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
The Alex Kingston interview was really good. The Derek Jacobi interview.
Oh, so good.
So good. Yeah, he was a pleasure to listen
Yeah,
to.
he talked very little about Doctor Who, just mostly about his career.
Which was totally fine.
Oh, totally fine. Yeah. Well, they mentioned that. Like, he was in one story.
Right. And to be fair, it's not like it was like, so in this Big Finish story,
Yes.
it's like, no, they did not do that. They asked him basically about Utopia, and then it was, God, what a career he's had.
I mean, he's freaking Derek Jacobi, for God's sakes. He's
Derek Jacobi.
Yeah, Sir Derek Jacobi. And
when he's talking about meeting Laurence Olivier,
yeah,
I don't really care about what his opinion of Doctor Who is. Let's put it that way.
And I thought it was adorable that this guy, who certainly has been regarded for decades as this great actor, talked about how nervous he was when he guest starred on an episode of Frasier.
Oh, yeah.
And how he was intimidated by all these actors because Frasier, like Cheers, wasn't simply a big hit in the US, it was a big hit in the UK as well. So he was intimidated by these people.
Meanwhile, he won an Emmy for it. And
yes, he won it. I know.
I'm a big Cheers and Frasier fan. Not so much of the Frasier reboot going on now, but when Frasier was on with Niles and that whole, the Derek Jacobi episode is one of the best ones, and he won an Emmy for it. And I'll just say, of course, he won an Emmy for it because he was playing a horrible Shakespearean actor.
Yes.
You know how hard that must have been for him to play an awful Shakespearean actor?
But it must have been fun. It must have been so much fun.
Oh, he threw himself into it completely. Yeah, it's totally great.
One of my favorite moments was when the moderator showed him his action figure from Utopia.
Oh, yes.
So, have you seen these before? And he goes, oh, I already have 2 on my desk. Now I have 3.
Yeah, it was like, and he just took it.
Yeah. He posed it on the armrest of his chair. So, that was a big treat.
You spoke on a panel.
Right. I spoke to a few of the people on a panel about the Magic the Gathering Doctor Who sets, which I thought went well. It was better attended than I expected, to be honest. We had a nice conversation. Audience members were asking us questions. And I think all of us on the panel were floored by this one guy in the front.
Oh, him. Yeah.
He's a Magic fan, and he's only at Gallifrey One because the Magic the Gathering set made him curious about Doctor Who.
Did its job.
It turned him into a fan of Doctor Who, which I don't think any of us anticipate. I mean, I think some of us who worked on it maybe thought, okay, we'll get a few Doctor Who fans to play Magic the Gathering. I just never expected the opposite to happen, too.
No, I always thought it would be, you would get either Doctor Who fans who would use this as an excuse to learn Magic. And as you said on the panel, spoilers, it's a fun deck. It's not the best way to learn Magic.
Correct.
Using the Doctor Who decks. But
the
art's gorgeous. So I thought it would either be Doctor Who fans going, okay, I've been curious about Magic the Gathering, I'll learn it. Or you're like me, where it's like, I'm a very casual player. I bought a deck because I was like, I like the art, and it's Doctor Who. That's an excuse to play it. But it was wild to hear somebody go, I didn't really know the show until I picked up the deck. Okay.
Yeah. So, that was a treat. Hearing Billie Piper speak was terrific. Yeah, it was just a really good time. And again, besides Mike's cosplay as the Jacobi Master, there were a number of other outstanding cosplays as there were last year. So
my personal favorite was there was a group of 4 people, one of whom was the android.
Oh, yes.
And they actually had the whole game show set up. They had the 9th Doctor. Rose was walking around with a podium.
Yes.
with her name on it. Yeah. And the guy who was playing, whoever the director was, like the showrunner.
He had the headset. He had the headset and the clipboard. Yep.
Yeah. They had the whole thing.
That
and
was
one of
awesome.
the nice things they did was they set up in front of like this big display of the Ninth Doctor's TARDIS.
Yes.
And as they were taking pictures, some people were like, that's awesome. So they had Rose's name on the podium, which was a whiteboard.
Right.
She would just say, "What's your name?" and erase her name and just write in whatever you wanted. And you got to stand behind the podium next to Rose.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. Like I said, it was super friendly, super nice. I had this, I want to say like a 10-minute conversation with this guy who built the Dalek at one point.
Oh, really?
Well, I was amazed I build models and stuff. So this thing was moving around so well. I was like,
yeah, it was.
What battery do you have in that? Because I could not, it was so, the Dalek was so heavy.
Yeah.
And the thing was moving around effortlessly. Like, usually you see them and you kind of hear it like the gears straining. I was like, what do you have in there? So he actually popped it open and I was looking inside of it. It was wild stuff.
Wow.
So, yes.
So there wasn't a horribly deformed mutant inside?
No, that was disappointing. I was waiting for the claw. I was waiting for the claw to grab me by the neck. But
Damn it.
Next year.
But yeah, that was a really good time. I fully intend to go back next year.
Yep.
Possibly in cosplay.
Yes, I'm working out what I want to do for cosplay. I'll just hint at it. Paul Darrow and Timelash. Maybe what it... Vina. I just want to say that over and over again. Vina. Oh, Doctor, you're so white.
Herbert? Okay. Let's see. So I think, Mike, now that we've pretty much covered all of the stories about the cosmic beings and the gods in Doctor Who, with the exception of Pyramids of Mars, which will be a upcoming bonus episode, what are your overall thoughts about gods, cosmic beings, and how they fit or don't fit into Doctor Who?
Well, you actually kind of hit the nail on the head. We did a whole season on this. I enjoyed the stories very much.
Mm-hmm.
I really have appreciated the fact that we got to do the Key to Time season.
Yep.
I thought that was phenomenal. That's one I have just overlooked over and over again. And Mary Tam is phenomenal. I love doing that. I like doing the Fifth Doctor story. I've enjoyed this pretty much from top to bottom. So I want to make that very clear.
Again, as happened when we did our season about Leela, I have a newfound appreciation for the Graham Williams era.
Yes.
Which I had not thought of all that fondly before, but having covered 2 seasons of it, I'm like, well, this is pretty good.
Yeah, I was pretty derisive of it before. Not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone had, I forget which listener, I'm blanking out. I'm sorry. We have had 1 or 2 listeners suggest we do more Graham Williams stories as bonus episodes. That may be possible because that's been fun. Having said all that, I guess I thought of godlike beings in Doctor Who much like being villains that challenge the Justice League.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to do. When I say villains that challenge the Justice League, that's always why I've found the Justice League to be a tough comic, I would assume, to write for, because you need a villain who can equally challenge Superman and Batman.
Right.
And what will challenge Superman in a fight will probably kill most of the rest of the Justice League. So, I think there's a reason our godlike beings either turned out not to be so much or rarely were that physically powerful.
Yeah.
In the stories. I mean, the Guardians just hang back and let other people do their dirty work, which I think is story-wise smart. Now, it's kind of disappointing because the ongoing issue I found with a lot of these stories was you're a frickin' godlike being. Why don't you just will things to happen? They should be able to easily get what they want no matter what the Doctor does. And for reasons they don't. Yeah. Honestly, the best realized version of it came about rather unplanned, and that's the Giggle.
Yeah.
Neil Patrick Harris's Toymaker is legit a god and acts like one.
Right.
And it's his own hubris that lets him fall, and the fact that he does have certain rules he does need to follow.
He needs, there are the rules of the game.
Right.
He needs to obey them.
Yeah, and that's why I said it then, and I'll say it now. The most brilliant, underrated thing about the Giggle is at the end of the puppet show, the Doctor just going, I challenge you to a duel, because he's locking in the toy maker to rules.
Yes.
The toy maker can run amok if he's not playing a game. So that's why he just does high card, because he's going, okay, I have a good chance at banishing you with just by the draw of a card. It's luck. It's 50-50, but I have a good shot at this.
Right.
But he's one that is incredibly well realized and thought out.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, you have the gods of Ragnarok, who I still don't understand.
That was going to be my example of one that was like, huh? What? Because they pop up out of nowhere in the last episode. I mean, they've been around, but we didn't know who or what they were. And then when we're suddenly told, oh, it's the gods of Ragnarok. Huh? What? Where? What?
Right. And again, we get back, talked about in the story, but just they're ridiculous. We're waiting for random people to show up and entertain us, and then we're going to complain. I mean, they're the ultimate Karens. Somebody shows up. Oh, bored now. Dead. It's like, what were you expecting?
Oh, my God.
It's like, if you are really this omnipotent, why are you on this podunk planet? Why aren't you like at the entertainment? Go to Vegas.
Yeah.
Go somewhere where there's, I don't know, somewhere where there's real entertainment, or even better than, just a whiz kid.
Yeah.
I don't know. That one to me was the worst. I'll say the other highlight to me, which I've always liked, but I really liked the internal in Enlightenment.
Yes.
Enlightenment really jumped out to me. I've always liked that story, but in rewatching that one, that was like the Eternals as limited godlike beings. I like the fact that they had the power, but no imagination. That's a brilliant setup. You could do anything, except you can't really think of anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how powerful are you? I mean, I thought that was a great story of pointing out real power is imagination.
Yeah.
I mean, they have all this physical power and all this mental power, but because they don't know what to do with it, it doesn't do them any good.
Yeah. And also another story I liked quite a bit, and we talked about how surprised we both were about how much we liked the story. Watching it again recently was The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit.
Oh, yeah.
Because here, we're talking about Satan, the beast, not some powerful entity pretending to be Satan.
Right. This isn't the Daemons.
We're talking about, yes. This isn't like a little statue of a demon with the tongue sticking out.
Right.
This is Satan. And so you would think, okay, well, how can the Doctor beat that? And cleverly, the story doesn't try to pose the Doctor defeating, Satan, the beast, in some power struggle. It's more powerful, far more powerful beings than the Doctor have imprisoned it. And so Satan is manipulating people and attempting to manipulate the Doctor into freeing it by orchestrating this whole series of circumstances that the Doctor won't have any choice but to free it, because the beast knows things about the Doctor. It knows pretty much everything about everybody else in that story. It knows their fears, their dreams, and the Doctor has to not necessarily beat the beast. He just has to be, for a moment, one step ahead of the beast.
Right.
He needs to kind of put aside any emotion and think about this logically. Like, why is this beast held here? What could these two urns be doing?
Right.
And so, he pieces it together. And I thought, that's how you handle it. Like your Justice League problem. You don't make it a power level thing. You create a situation where the protagonist just has to do one thing, has to be ahead of the godlike being just once.
Right.
Just once in order to succeed.
Yeah. And to your point also, like the beast, the fact that it works a little better, I think, when you have the godlike being, in this case, the beast, is imprisoned.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, so technically they're omnipotent. In this particular situation, they're just extremely powerful. And if our hero or protagonist does not succeed, they're going to become even more powerful.
Correct.
And that's when literally all hell will break loose.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a smart move. I think you have to make it, and the Doctor generally wins through being more clever.
Yeah.
When we've talked about the godlike beings, and I think almost all of them were, some were very, very powerful and could do things.
Yeah.
The power, none of them, I think, were like this above and beyond intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
They might have moments where they were more clever than the Doctor, but
yes,
the Doctor was at least reasonably their equal when it came to intelligence and coming up with a plan.
Yeah. And when the Doctor does win, it's usually a combination of one or more things. Like, okay, the Doctor is just one step ahead once. The Doctor, in the case of the Eternals in Enlightenment, it's the Doctor's faith in Turlo at the end.
Yep.
Faith in, that enables him to defeat Rack and keep any of the Eternals from winning Enlightenment, because he knows any of them winning Enlightenment would be a bad thing. And even in, we'll talk about this when we cover Pyramids of Mars. It's a similar situation with the Beast, where Sutekh was imprisoned. And the Doctor just has to think of one thing at the very end that will keep Sutekh trapped.
Yep.
So now, the one story I'm kind of ambivalent about with regard to this is the Jodie Whittaker story that we covered. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me
hear
now?
me? Can you hear me? I always want to say, can you see me? But no, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Yep.
And there, it's, while they're not the greatest villains we've seen, they are kind of interesting. And the Doctor defeats them by doing a classic Doctor maneuver, which is use your enemy's abilities against them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what she does. The Doctor uses their technology and, their power against them, because in their arrogance, they just didn't expect that.
Yeah. And that gets to, I think, what we've really uncovered with this, and we've said this before, but I think it bears worth repeating. Most of these kind of villains, if you're going to say they're godlike, they're Greek or Roman godlike.
Okay. Yeah.
As in very flawed. As in, they're more physically powerful. They may have mental powers that go beyond what humanity can do.
Right.
But they are flawed, and they have an intellect that is comparable to most people. They're not smarter than most. Zelen from Can You Hear Me? He's clever, but he's not that smart. I mean,
no.
And the same go with the Eternals. We've said that. They don't have imagination. Even Josiah in Ghostlight is...
Oh, yeah.
Some of his ideas are like, really? Okay. But they make sense because he's deliberately sheltered. So he doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
So that's season 3.
Yeah. It's I've enjoyed talking about these stories with you, Mike. I mean, we've uncovered a few stories that, we really didn't think highly of a year ago, and we really like them now. And it's been interesting to just go through them and see how the different writers handle this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things I'm very glad about is we literally covered this season we covered literally from the first Doctor to the 15th.
Yeah.
That's the breadth of it. So
yeah, I know. Pretty wild. So what's ahead, Mike?
Ahead, this is the official end of season 3 for us. No more godlike beings, cosmic creatures, what have you, guardians. We're all done with that. Again, we will have a special bonus episode coming out shortly that next couple of weeks that will feature Pyramids of Mars, just because we felt that doing that bonus episode a couple months from now with that story was going to be kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're going back to this now, so we're just going to do it now. And then, speaking of River Song, we are going to start season 4. Hello, sweetie. We are going to be doing all the televised stories with River Song, starting with Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead.
Yes.
And we will cover all the River televised stories, and then a handful of the Big Finish stories, because some of them are quite good.
Yeah. And as we said before, we had a long discussion off mic about how we would cover this, and we discussed the pros and cons of doing this in order of broadcast or doing this in order of how River Song saw these stories from her timeline point of view. But we decided to stick with the the episode release chronological order.
Right. I think that's just easier to track and a little
agree.
less confusing. I mean,
Yeah.
River Song's timeline is definitely timey-wimey to begin with. So let's try to keep this relatively simple. But I'm looking forward to this.
Me too.
We have covered a handful of Modern Who, so for the next year or so, buckle up. We're going to be covering a lot of Modern Who. I do want to add, if you have any suggestions, listeners, please put them in our Instagram or Twitter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice we haven't been doing a lot of What Would Moffat Do? And that's mostly because we've been doing modern stuff, which is kind of hard to do. And particularly when we do the televised stories, these are all Moffat penned stories. So what would Moffat do? Exactly what you just saw.
You're looking at it. Yes.
Right. So if you have any suggestions for, we're not doing What Would Eric Say would do, because that's shoot things.
Oh my God.
If you have any other ideas for segments, by all means, email us, contact us, let us know. I'm not saying we'll do it, but we don't have anything planned. We're open to ideas.
What would Barry Letts do?
Have something with Tibetan monks and.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Ken, if listeners want to contact you on the interwebs, what is the best way for them to do so?
You can email me at kenhartwriter@gmail.com, and you can contact me on social media at either kenhartwriter on Instagram or kenhartwriter on Threads. Mike, what about you?
You can email me at mikeferguson1@gmail.com, or you can contact you can check out my Instagram or Threads. Both I am at Mike Ferguson 5150. And I also maintain our Twitter account. I'm refusing to call it X. It is Prepare the Pod.
Yes. So. And as we mentioned before, you can also find our Instagram feed at Prepare the Pod. So until next time, officially next time, not counting the bonus episode, when we enter the library and begin season 4, I have been Ken.
And I've been Mike.
And we'll see you next time on Prepare the Timelash.
So long.
Bye.
Well, bless my soul. So you've done it again, Doctor.
The theme music for Prepare the Timelash is provided courtesy of Soundsmith Productions. If you like this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe to Prepare the Timelash on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, or any of your favorite RSS feeds or podcatchers. And if you really like this podcast, please leave us a review at one of those locations. For more information about Prepare the Timelash, check out our website at preparethetimelash.com. To get in touch with us or receive updates and notifications about future episodes, follow us on Twitter at PrepareThePod. Thanks for listening.